Hey, Dave. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started pretty soon. If everybody could sort of wrap up conversations and take their seats. Do we have a clicker? Oh, there it goes.
It was working.
Couple seconds, that's all right. 6:29, we did pretty well. Well, thank you very much. I wonder how much tap dancing I can do. So, we'll do just a couple welcome. Really, this is a fantastic turnout. Appreciate everybody's time to come. Hopefully, you've had a chance, or you were able to attend our February meeting. Closer. Let's do that. Everybody hear me now? All right. Usually I'm pretty good at projecting. So again, I hope everybody had a chance to come in February to our meeting, but if you did not, we do have the website. All the materials are there. As probably many of you heard me as you were coming in tonight, we do have what we presented in February. So we've got all the different alternatives. And then we had some simulations. So all of that content is on. Everything that you see tonight will also be on our new website, and I kind of show that a little bit. So as we go through. So real quick, this is an important meeting for us. We are at a point where we really need decisions on what alternative that we move forward. So we are recommending an alternative tonight, but that doesn't mean that is the alternative. We have public opinion survey that we're going to be looking from your perspective as far as what you like. We went through the evaluation from what we worked on leading up to February. Dave McNamara behind me from Stantec is going to go through what the public opinion survey results revealed for us and kind of helped us craft what you see and what you'll see tonight later. But it really is important, and later in the presentation we'll go through the timeline of events from this point, what we would foresee. So if we have a decision tonight, we're going to continue working forward. And a couple people have asked that question about when we could anticipate it. But the next big milestone after this decision is a public right-of-way hearing. And we think that we could do that next fall in 24. And if we're successful at that point, then we'd be looking for construction in 26, 27. So again, if we don't have a decision, we just end up pushing the decision out, and then we have different decisions to make at that time. So again, this is your meeting. That's the most important thing. And I'll just kind of quickly introduce everybody from the department's team first. My name is Jason Ayotte. I'm the project manager from New Hampshire DOT. We have several, and I'm going to lose sight. I have Kathy Corliss from our design team. She is the project lead. I have Sarah Healy, also on the design team as one of the design engineers. I'm fortunate to have Rebecca Martin, our environmental coordinator, and she will also be presenting a little bit later today, and we have a couple other special guests. I have Lila Flynn. She was one of our interns this summer and is experiencing the public informational for the first time. I have Nikki Hunter, our administrator of construction. She is also concerned. She is from the area, and she gets to use this, so a lot of valued input. From the design team, from Stantec, I have Dave McNamara directly behind me as the project manager. He's going to be doing most of our presentation today. I have Jerry Fortin, as you probably all are familiar with over the years. He was the project manager for the steering committee, and I have Tyler Gagnon, who is doing the lion's share of the design effort and producing the plan. So we appreciate your time. This is not a one-man band. So quick project history for everybody. You probably know this area much greater than I do. There was a significant amount of design alternatives, public. There's a committee started in 2010, 2011 by the town. That steering committee was the town's project. The town really took it on, tried to identify what they could and couldn't do. And that went through 2017 with Stantec as a design engineer. They put forward a few different alternatives. And then in 2018, they made the recommendations to the project manager at the time. And essentially it was the main recommendations were for Pickering Corner. The preferred alternative was pretty much leave the intersection as is. There was consideration that a mini roundabout at the time, which was a larger diameter roundabout than what is being recommended tonight, would be acceptable if we could minimize impacts. And then there was no preference. Not an alternative that they wanted to carry forward was the signalized intersection alternative. In addition to that, they wanted to address bicycle and pedestrian safety with widening the road so that we would have wider shoulders. We'd also address the crossing at Kingswood, and then there was also the entire length of the project at the time went from Alton all the way to Pickering Corner. So those recommendations were given at 2018, and again, there was different recommendations, but essentially the main delivery, the main letter to the department was focused on Pickering Corner. In 2019, the department then initiated our preliminary engineering. That's when our design teams got involved and it became our project. So we took the recommendations from the town, which is probably one of the most robust initial steps that a town takes. We typically don't get that from the department's standpoint. So I was fortunate enough to be the design engineer on the time, and that's when we initiated the project advisory committee, and we have many of the members that were on the steering committee at the time that are part of that group. And that focus of the group is really kind of a vetting and of the different alternatives, the weighting criteria. A lot of the information that you saw came directly from the steering committee that translated into the project advisory committee, which we have today. And then, unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and it kind of stalled us for a little bit. So, as the project advisory committee started, I think we had the initial meeting, and then the second meeting was canceled by a weather delay, and then COVID hit. So we were kind of a little bit stuck in the mud for about a year and a half. And once we kind of came out of the pandemic and we got our feet back under us, we were able to engage Stantec to really kind of help us get over most of those hurdles. So everything that you see tonight, some of it has been redone as part of the steering committee, but that's a necessity out of our National Environmental Policy Act requirements that we need, that Rebecca is responsible for. So just a quick, so purpose and need. This is really important for us. One of the other things that we went through with the project advisory committee was to identify what the purpose and need is, and this is really the deciding point for our projects. If we meet the purpose and need, then we would receive federal funding and we can move forward. What is different about this purpose and need is it kind of is a blend of the vision and the problem statements that were identified in the steering committee. So initially, this project came forward in the 10-year plan as a drainage and a roadway widening project. Because of the committee and their work, we were able to introduce mobility and safety as two important measures that we need to rate this project. So as we get a little bit further, and I'm not going to read this slide for slide, this information is available. I'm sorry, I'm not going to read every word, but this information is available on our website. and you're welcome to read it. But bringing in mobility and concerns for bicycle and pedestrians is really important, as well as safety, which, in addition to bicycles and pedestrians, does evaluate the vehicle safety at the two intersections. So again, this is our measuring stick in which Rebecca will write her environmental documentation, and if we meet the purpose and need, then we can move the project forward from a federal highway standpoint. All right, so where are we? Again, as I said, this is a really important milestone for us because we need your input in order to move to the next step. We have done as much as possible that we can do. The next major step for us is to take the impacts that we see out of the preferred alternative, and that preferred alternative would be what we all collectively decide on. And we move that forward. We start investigating the impacts on the historic resources that are within the corridor. So as we all know, we have significant historic and potentially archaeological resources between the Brewster Historic District and several properties. And we need to make sure that we identify what the potential impacts are, not just proposed, but also the construction impacts, so that we can discuss that with the State Historic Preservation Officer. So that's our next step. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that later, but we are there. And so once we have that, then we can move forward to the public right-of-way process, which in order to move past from a state requirements, then we would need to present a formal public hearing. It's a much different meeting than we have today, and that we would identify if we have the ability to acquire rights to some of the easements where we would need best management practices for water quality, sidewalks, and potentially construction easements. So that's kind of where we are today. The project website has been updated, and I will finish up real quickly. So we, on Monday, actually, the Department of Transportation's website went live with a new looking website anyway. So for those that are smartphone savvy, you're welcome to take a picture of the QR code, select the link should pop up as a yellow and then you can kind of get navigated there. It has all the information that we need today. So with that, there are several breaks, a couple other, here I'll back up so you can take a picture if you were looking to do that. There's a lot of information tonight. Dave's going to do a good job. We have a couple breaks where we ask, you're welcome to ask questions. The breaks, we're looking for 2 to 3 questions. We have a lot more time at the very end of the presentation, but certainly if there's a clarification of the content that Dave speaks about, then please come up. When you do come up, we'll turn the microphone on. If you could just introduce yourselves, your name and your address, that would be fantastic. So I'm going to, at this point, introduce Dave McNamara, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. My name's Dave McNamara, and I'm with Stantec, the project manager for them. So I'm going to talk through a little bit about the recap from February when we had the public informational meeting, and then I'll get into the different alternatives and the different locations along the corridor. So back in February, we had a nice turnout, probably a little less than we have tonight. We had about 60 attendees. We had the 4 stations set up, so we had a McManus station, a Pickering station, the whole corridor station, then another station for the environmental piece. We also had a survey that was taken during the meeting and also online after the meeting. We had a little over 80 responses from that survey. That was separated into 4 different, each of the stations kind of had an individual survey within there. And through those, we got ratings, we got preferences, we got just some open comments on all the project. And that's informed some of what we've done since then and what we'll talk a little bit about tonight. So I'm going to start with the project corridor. So this is really the section of the project in between the 2 main intersections, the kind of McManus and Pleasant Valley area at the southern end, and then the Pickering corner at the northern end. So you can see here the school, the high school is really where we're going to start, and then we're going to continue up into sort of the frontage of Brewster just before Pickering. So what we learned in the survey, primary concerns, I think they're fairly self-explanatory. Traffic speed was a big one. Lack of pedestrian accommodations in some areas, and some of that I think is conditioned, not necessarily just the presence of sidewalks. The pedestrian crossings, the locations and the safety of those crossings, a lack of bicycle accommodations within the corridor, and finally the golf course crossing, which comes up quite a bit. So the one kind of variable in the corridor. Really, the intent is to put back two 11-foot lanes, which are out there today, and then widen the shoulders from the 1 to 2 feet out to about a 5-foot, or out to a 5-foot shoulder on either side. So you'd have bike facilities on either side of the road. And then really the variable is the sidewalk. You know, we were asking, do you want the sidewalk at the curb line? Do you want the sidewalk with a small grass panel for some landscaping, or the sidewalk a full 8 feet back away from the road, but with some room for landscaping in between? So really what we heard in the survey is that 0 to 4 foot panel was the preference. There wasn't a lot of interest in that wider grass panel between the sidewalk and the roadway. And there was also a preference to kind of keep the path straight, so don't meander in between these different offsets. So this is what that looks like. On the top here is really the full section of road. So there's a 66 feet of right-of-way across the corridor. And how we're filling that is the two 11-foot travel lanes, which is basically what's there today, a 5-foot shoulder on either side. So that's 32 feet, which is really curb to curb. Today, that's generally 24 feet with some variations. So that widening is really going to get the bicycle facilities within there. And then the sidewalk panels, there's about 17 feet on either side from the curb line out to the existing right-of-way. So the sidewalk panels with that 0 to 4 foot variability that you see down here, a new 6-foot sidewalk, and then a 2-foot utility panel is about 12 feet. So that leaves a little bit of space on either side so we can fit this in within the right-of-way. There will be some impacts in terms of tying down work behind the sidewalk. As you know, some of the sidewalks are below the road. We're proposing to put curbing in so the sidewalks will be up. They won't get flooded during rain events, but it is going to mean some work on the backside of sidewalks to tie them back in. And then in the few areas where there is no sidewalk proposed, kind of in the southwest end of it across like the golf course and heading out of town, we'd replicate kind of the existing ditch that's out there. So there would be no curbing, and we'd have the drainage flow off the edge of the road and through this ditch and be carried meet into the existing ditches that are out there. The 5-foot shoulder would still be in place. This 1 foot is just off the edge of pavement. So the pavement width would be the same. So that's really what the corridor looks like. And some of you may have had a chance to look at the plans here. I'll kind of walk through the corridor and some of the highlights here. So starting at the school, one of the things we had talked about with the school is moving this driveway. Right now, the existing kind of center drive to the school comes out off of this parking lane, is move it over to this kind of internal routing, which will make it easier for the buses. Right now, the buses go right to turn left and go left to turn right. This will allow them to go straight to turn left and then turn right to go right. So this will eliminate some of the confusion coming out of the school and help with some internal circulation at the school. And then as we continue up, I'll just pause. One thing I should point out, colors are a little muted here on the screen, but the darker yellow is the paved roadway. The purple is proposed sidewalk. The orange is driveway tie-ins. And you can kind of see the brown, that's the 5-foot shoulder as we go through the whole corridor. So as we work our way up, we come to the golf course crossing. The expectation or the intent is to square that up, so make that crossing perpendicular to the road. Do some clearing, make it more visible from the approaches so people are aware that it's there and they're not surprised by it when they get there. And then add a more prominent crossing and add an RFB similar to what's in front of Brewster further up, to at least give the drivers a little more knowledge that it's coming. And maintain the signage and the information on the golf course side that the carts need to wait for cars. And then as we continue north through the golf course, the next kind of highlight, so there's still no sidewalk on the west side through here. The existing sidewalk continues or is rebuilt on the east side. And then as we get towards the top of the golf course in the Cove's End area, this is the first BMP, or it's a stormwater detention and treatment facility that we're showing here. So as part of the project, we need to treat at least the equivalent of twice the increase in pavement area. So we're adding the 3 to 4 feet on each side. That's all new pavement. We've got to treat stormwater at least twice that. What we're actually showing right now is, and we'll get to a couple more of these, is we're treating virtually all the pavement through this area. So we've got more treatment out here than is required. You know, as we refine the design, we'll be able to refine the drainage numbers and play around with these a little bit. But this is, at this level, this is the first of the BMPs. So we would be taking water essentially from in front of the high school where you've got that high point. As it's coming down, it'll be collected in a stormwater system underground and piped into a drainage, we call them BMP. So this is the first location that we'll see. And then as we continue on, we do pick up the sidewalk. So the sidewalk from Old Mill to the library area, this is really the new extension of sidewalk. Everything else on the east side stays the same. So we've added a crossing at Old Mill. We've got a crosswalk here at the library. And one thing I should have noted, all of these uncontrolled crossings, we're proposing to have those RFBs. So similar to what's in front of Brewster now with the flasher that goes on when people want to cross, we're proposing that at all the uncontrolled crossings. So if there's not a stop sign or a yield sign, these are being proposed. So other than that, through this stretch is basically, you know, going back kind of like it is. You can see in some of these areas where the sidewalk's a little bit off and you can see the green. That's where that 4-foot grass strip is, and some other areas where it's right up on the curb. So then the final piece of the corridor, as we get into the Brewster area and just ahead of Pickering, as we come through to Crescent Lake Ave, the next proposed BMP is down here behind Huggins off of Crescent Lake Ave. So what we've done is we've kind of worked that in based on some wetlands knowledge and what we have out here, and we're showing some work to rebuild Crescent Lake Ave because we'd have to run piping down Crescent Lake to feed into this BMP. And then we'd also be replicating the crossing here at Green Street and Crescent Lake. So that's basically what we have on the corridor. I don't know if there's any clarifications or questions or thoughts here, or I'll move into McManus. All right. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yep. So the BMP is a best management practice. So it's a stormwater detention treatment facility. So it's a stormwater, what may be known as a pond. Depending on the type and depending on what the final numbers are, it may be a dry area, it may be a wet pond. There's a number of different ways we can go. And then the RRFBs are these. So it's that rectangular rapid flashing beacon. You see them in front of Brewster. It's got that little flash that goes under the crossing sign. Yep. No, I apologize. All right, so McManus and Pleasant Valley, we've kind of looped together the existing Y intersection with Pleasant Valley, and then obviously the existing intersection here at McManus, and then the school. And you can see where the existing school drive comes out off of this parking area. So the first alternative we've looked at is this, we're calling it a minimum build. It tees up Pleasant Valley a little bit. There's not a ton of work here, so the existing kind of comes out in this triangle, so we pull it back a little bit and get a little bit of a tee here. There's some slight improvements to the curbing, but basically the McManus intersection goes back like it is. It's 2 lanes in each direction. You've got the 2 lanes coming out of McManus, the 1 lane going in. So no real change operationally at McManus, other than we're still showing the improvement to the school drive. And over here, you see our third detention basin, BMP, in this triangle area between Pleasant Valley and Main Street. So the next alternative here is the enhanced striping. So this one, we tee up Pleasant Valley Road a little bit more, so we get a little bit more room to kind of line up and get squared before you leave Pleasant Valley. But then when we get to McManus, what we've done is added an exclusive left turn pocket into McManus off of Main Street. And that'll allow outbound traffic basically to bypass and keep going south. What that does is it does create some extra pavement on the other side. It does allow for a left turn pocket into Pleasant Valley as well. So this is a little bit of widening. We push into the right-of-way a little bit through here, but it does open things up a little bit, and it has some pros and cons we'll talk about in a minute. And then finally, we have the compact roundabout. So Pleasant Valley, we haven't changed. We kind of kept that the same between these two. Compact roundabout, as you see here. So you get 2 lanes coming in, 2 lanes going out, 2 lanes on the minor approaches as well. The difference with the compact roundabout than some of the other ones that you've seen is really the narrow, or the small diameter, but also this center area is just the truck apron. So most of these roundabouts you'll see they've got the landscaping circle or a statue, something in the middle of it behind kind of a raised truck apron. This is all truck apron. So the larger trucks and buses, as they take lefts through here, they can really use that whole kind of circle in here. They don't have any obstructions going through there. But it's still got that raised curb, the 3-inch curb, that makes the smaller, normal vehicles want to go around it and use the roundabout properly. So those were really what we talked about at the February meeting, and we'll get into a little bit about what we heard back either through the meeting and within the survey coming out of that. So our first question was really, what are your key concerns at this intersection? And you can see here the traffic flow and the safety really rose above all of them. These shot to the top. School access, bus traffic related concerns was next, and then speed traffic calming was fourth. So these 4 really stood out, and then there are a handful of others that had smaller numbers of votes, if you will. So when we asked what your preferred alternative was, the roundabout got 21st place votes as the preferred alternative. The enhanced striping version got 16, and then the minimum bill got 9 votes. So the roundabout had the most first place votes as the preferred alternative. And after we asked about the preferred alternative, we asked, why did you prefer that? What was it about that alternative that made you choose it as your top alternative? So traffic calming capacity really rose to the top on these, which makes sense. They line up with what the roundabout can provide. And then the ped bike accommodations and driver clarity and safety were the next couple that came out of McManus. Sure. I'll tell you, so he just asked where we found the votes. So in this case, we had a survey available at the meeting. So people filled out by hand the survey questions, or you could also access that survey online, similar to what we have tonight. And so people went online and filled out that survey. So all of this data came out of those 2 surveys. It was the same survey. You could do it either way.
Wally Keniston, Wolfeboro. I never heard anything about voting on a roundabout.
Were you here in February?
I was here.
So the survey was passed out and available at each of the stations, and then information on how to access it online was also here.
It's right in front of where I live.
Okay. So the next step that we're taking is we want to evaluate these alternatives and start to narrow them, as Jason mentioned. So there are a number of constraints that we want to work within and have been established for the project. The layout, maintaining 2 lanes. Nobody wants to see 4 lanes through here. That's not part of the project. We want to either maintain or increase the sidewalks, improve the bike facilities, minimize impacts to right-of-way, identify and avoid to the extent practical the historic resources, natural resources. There's a number of them. There's the existing street trees, there's water quality issues, and then there's stormwater icing and ponding and erosion issues throughout the area. And we also want to maintain and enhance the landscape. We want to maintain that village type feel, and we don't want to urbanize this stretch of road. So we worked with a PAC and came up with some alternative criteria and a rating system. And that considers the project constraints. That includes the public responses from the February PIM and survey, We rate these different elements as positive, neutral, or negative, and then we give it an overall score of an average of those different criteria. So McManus, as you can see here, pedestrian safety, survey results, property impacts, traffic calming, traffic operations, stormwater and water quality, maintain the village feel, and construction costs are the criteria that we worked off of. And then you've got the overall score here. And then the alternatives coming down the column over here, the no build, minimum build, enhanced striping. Enhanced striping is an all stop, and then the compact roundabout. So the no build is always an alternative. The one thing I would note, the no build in this case is a complete no build. It's not just a no build of McManus, we're looking at it as a complete no build of the whole project. So just a few things to highlight. You know, the compact roundabout did score the best. It had the top survey results, but it also functions the best from a traffic calming, traffic operations, the stormwater, because we're going to add treatment, all of the alternatives scored well on the stormwater. So the traffic calming helps with the maintain the village feel. The enhanced striping, the traffic calming, what it's going to do is it's going to help speed up traffic going through there. So that through traffic's going to be able to go by faster than it does today when it's kind of getting caught up in those left turns. So that's actually going to hurt the traffic calming. The enhanced striping is basically the same layout, or the enhanced striping all stop, we didn't talk about. It's the same layout as the enhanced striping, but it have stops on all three legs. And what that does is it just backs everything up. It doesn't function well. It looks no different than the other one, but that's why we kind of excluded that from the graphics. And then you see the minimum build, it minimizes the impacts to property. It's kind of neutral on some of the other traffic operations. It functions like it does today. So in summary, we had the compact roundabout rated the highest, the traffic calming, it improves the pedestrian crossings, allows the pedestrians to cross one leg at a time with traffic slowed down. It's the most efficient with traffic capacity. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. There are some concerns with young drivers being right at the high school and newer drivers having to use it. It does have the most right-of-way impacts. And then the minimum build was looked at as an acceptable alternative. We can enhance the crossings with the RRFBs. It has minimal right-of-way impacts and it minimizes construction costs. So these were the two. We took the three alternatives, we narrowed them down to these two. As you see, our preferred, which we'll get into a little more detail at the end, or our recommended, is the roundabout. And so what we're hoping tonight is to get input on that. As Jason said, we want to narrow this down so that we can start to move this forward. Our recommendation is that, but we certainly want to hear from you if otherwise. So just a little bit on that compact roundabout. This is a project we did in Manchester, Vermont a number of years ago. This is kind of your more traditional roundabout over here with the landscape center. But then you see over here, this is what we're talking about as that compact roundabout, is something similar to what you're looking at here with the full kind of truck apron circle. So that's McManus. If there are any other questions or thoughts, and we can come back at the end and have more input as well. Otherwise, we'll move to Pickering. So existing conditions, Pickering, right here, Center Street, Main Street coming through, Brewster Academy campus. Everyone's pretty familiar there, I'm sure. So again, starting at the minimum build, this is basically putting back what's there. It's redefining and building out the sidewalks that have been kind of crushed and buried on these corners of Center Street, but it maintains the shoulder on the southbound, maintains the single lane coming through south, the right lane turn here, and the through lane coming through here. So it does allow that bypass that essentially exists today in the shoulder without the defined left turn pocket. And then this is the existing RRFB at Brewster, and then the addition of RFBs potentially at crossings under this scenario. One other thing to note here, we have talked with Brewster about the potential of closing off this drive and giving them access in the back here to kind of simplify any of these alternatives at this intersection. Take this drive out of the equation. So then enhanced striping, very similar to McManus. it creates this pure left turn pocket, and then it would create this through lane coming through southbound. So it's a similar discussion with McManus. It's really going to allow that southbound traffic to go through. It could hurt the lefts trying to come out of Pickering and come out of Center Street. So the signalized intersection came up and, sure, yeah. Good. So the signalized option is laid out like the enhanced striping. So it's got the left turn, it's got the 2 lanes coming north, the 2 lanes coming south, and the 2 lanes coming out of Center Street. And then we add the signal equipment to it. So there's some widening involved for the enhanced striping that would also be involved here. The other thing we'd have to do here is we've got to put in the signal equipment. So we've got to put in the mast arms and the control cabinets and the meter pedestals and all the pedestrian push buttons and pedestrians. So really the layout on the Center Street side and in front of the gas stations, the sidewalk layout would be the same as it is today, or pretty close, but then there'd have to be equipment behind it to support those signals. So from a right-of-way perspective, there are some impacts, but there's also some kind of constraints on the gas stations with adding the signal equipment. And then all the crossings would be controlled through that signal. So we would have pedestrian phases as part of that. And then finally, the compact roundabout again, still with the Brewster kind of leg over here. What this does, it does push. So one of the things we've tried to do is in respect for the gas stations, we've tried to push this more towards the Brewster side. And that's been acceptable with them, especially with this connection over here. So it's a similar setup to McManus. It's got the fully traversable center island. And we do pull away a little bit, which I'll show in a second, on these 2 gas stations to create a little bit of space. So this does allow us to have 1 lane or 2 lanes in each direction approaching. So where we've got multiple lanes, coming up Center Street, coming northbound, and even the widened shoulder on the southbound side, we actually get to narrow that pavement a little bit because we only need the single lanes coming into the roundabout. And so just to touch on the gas stations here, so what we're showing here is basically starting with 3 Sisters, you can come in and out any way you want on both sides, on South Main Street as well as on Center Street. And then you circulate within the lot as you can. So with the roundabout, it's the same thing. You can come in from either direction on Center Street, on Main Street, and get in, and you can get out in either direction. The one advantage, or one of the advantages to the roundabout, it does eliminate the need to make that left. Because you can basically go out, take a right, and circle the roundabout. So you don't need to make your way through traffic to get out of here on the peak periods. You can actually use the roundabout. Same thing with Center Street. You can make your lefts essentially through the roundabout. And the other advantage of the roundabout, we had talked about pulling this over a little bit. You can see here in the darker orange, that's 780 square feet. So right now, that's the back of the sidewalk today. So all of that orange area is actually being added in front of the gas station parking lot. So that does provide some additional maneuvering within the front of that gas station lot. And then similar on the corner store side, you've got the full access from curb cuts on either side, but you've got to make those lefts against traffic. The roundabout still maintains the full access on both drives. And on this one, we had mentioned we can narrow down Center Street a little bit, down to the 1 lane, as well as a little bit of narrowing up here. So we pick up almost 1,000 square feet kind of around the perimeter here of the corner store lot in terms of maneuverability within the lot. Sure. Can you use a microphone so everyone can hear?
Coming from Center Street, there's only 1 lane. There would be only 1 lane entering the roundabout?
Correct.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Dave Shea. I live on King Pine Road. I have to come up to that traffic circle. In the middle of the summer, I'm not going to get in there with all the traffic coming through Main Street. We have a hard time getting out now.
Right.
So the only time I'm going to get a chance is if somebody uses their blinker, which is optional in some states, all right, and they make a right-hand turn. I'm stuck at that point where I am today. That whole section is very dangerous and very tied up today.
Well, we understand, and
So now that's one point. How many people took the survey, please?
we got 80,
And how many people live in the town? Any town?
6,000, somebody?
6,400. Would you consider, I don't want you to do a mailing with all this information. All I'm asking is send a mailing out to every taxpayer with the link and saying, here's the survey, please take the survey, and get a little bit more data. 80 people out of 6,400, good Lord, that's not enough, please. I'm against the roundabout. I'm in favor of a three-way stop. I'm in favor of it because it's cheaper, and it gives me a chance to get out. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. So a couple things. We're back here tonight to kind of show what we saw for results. We're not looking to create hostility. We have another public opinion survey so that people can weigh in as well. Previously, it was not only at the meeting, but we did have it on, we have a link from the town's website to the project website, and we had the survey available on that as well. So we're doing the best that we can with the technology and the time that we have available, but we're back here again to solicit more feedback. So this is not a done deal. I just want to remind everybody that we're seeking public input. We're not looking to create any contentiousness.
Let me give you a couple of suggestions. Go to the taxpayer. Put a flyer in the taxpayer. They all send out our bills. They can put a flyer in and say, here's our survey for what's going on. You'll get a lot more response that way.
No, and I appreciate that thought. We did, so there's direct mailings to all the abutters, and then also if you were in the postal code, you should have received a postcard with the website address, which the website address will have the public opinion survey for this meeting as well. So if you did not receive it, then it may have been, we can talk to the post office, but we did do direct mailings through the post office.
Which zip code?
03854, is that correct?
No.
94,
How about
sorry.
03896, which is Wolfeboro Falls, which
Wolfeboro
is
Falls.
most of the people in Wolfeboro Falls have to drive through there.
Okay. And that's something that we can work on next time. I certainly can drop in more
I'm not trying
mailings.
to be confrontational. I'm trying to give you, I mean, you had the meeting in February. You're at the tail end of COVID, so you didn't have that many people showing. It is wintertime. I think giving it to the taxpayer a chance to give you more information, you may not find that they would be in favor of a roundabout.
No, and I appreciate it, and that's why we're here tonight.
Okay.
That's
Thank
why
you.
we have a public survey.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Brody DeShays, I live on Elm Street. I had a question about the Civil War Memorial statue. So obviously that would have to be moved in this current presentation, or at least it seems
Correct.
like. Has the town and Brewster and DOT, have you talked about
Yes.
where that would be moved?
We've talked about the fact that it would need to be moved under this, and that
But no discussion about where?
exactly where it would end up, no.
Is that, would DOT be involved in that process, or is that just the town
I
of
think all
Brewster?
three would be involved in that. And that'd probably be
You would, so
historic
you would
as
be
well,
involved?
right?
Okay, because that's an important historical aspect, so.
Thank you. Thanks for that. It is a contributing element to the historic district, and so that would be, if anybody's interested in becoming a consulting party to our cultural resources review, there's pamphlets and more information about how you can do that. So those folks that identify as consulting parties would be able to be involved in all of those conversations. So we really appreciate when folks volunteer that time and get involved that way. But
I did.
oh, great. Awesome. So more to come on that, but we are planning a meeting for the cultural resources specifically in October. So all of those folks will be invited to that.
The major problem with the intersection over there is the backup traffic is the town. All the crosswalks, all the people going through there. What I'm afraid of, if you put a runabout there and the traffic gets all backed up and people ain't paying attention, they're going to be stuck in the middle of the runabout and the traffic's not going to move. With an intersection, if a driver's paying attention, he knows he can't block the right lane coming. I'm afraid that a runabout might cause a big bottleneck. Maybe not, but the big problem with the traffic is the town and the crosswalk and all the people go there. And it's not just the summer, it's the fall too.
Yep.
And it's busy sometimes in the wintertime. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So as we go through Pickering, again, back just finishing up the survey. So the roundabout, again, had the highest votes out of the survey respondents. Signalization was second, the enhanced striping, and then the minimum build. And to that question as to why you preferred your first alternative, again, traffic capacity and calming came to the top, similar to McManus. Driver clarity and safety, landscaping in this case came up, and then the ped bike accommodations were another important factor. So with the similar rating criteria and the alternatives over here that you see with really signalized added from what we saw at McManus, again, we rate the compact roundabout as the highest overall. The minimum build and the enhanced striping, both rated out based off of all the criteria as neutral, as acceptable. So a lot of this is similar in scoring to where McManus was individually through the different alternatives and the different elements. Sure. Yep. So here, I got it. She asked, we have a three-way stop alternative, which is this enhanced striping all-way stop here. And really,
Then I
Go
would
ahead.
like to say that I've never been at an intersection where there were stops 3 ways and it was actually efficient.
and it's not efficient.
Okay.
If you watch the video, the three-way stop just backs up. It doesn't function at all.
Backs up and it can't organize the
It's-
flow,
it's-
and it's
it-
terribly fuel inefficient, and I think it's going to make it worse.
It functions worse than it does today. Yeah, the three-way, and that's why we've kind of downplayed the three-way stop. It works worse than the existing condition. So again, the compact roundabout rated out the highest in our evaluation, the traffic calming, the pedestrian crossings. It's the most efficient with the traffic capacity. It does improve safety and driver clarity. You know, the concerns with the stations, with changes to the gas station lots, as well as Brewster Academy impacts and the statue. The enhanced striping was acceptable. It does create that exclusive left turn lane. There's really no permanent changes on the gas station side other than we really want to redefine the curbing and the sidewalks that exist out there today. It minimizes construction disruption. It does likely increase speeds because you're not going to be caught up in those left turns waiting to go. And it's going to hurt the left turns coming out of Center Street because you'll have that free flow going southbound. And then minimal build is acceptable, pretty straightforward. The left turn bypass would remain, so you'd still be able to get around those left turners like you do today. Minimizes any changes to the abutters, and no changes on Brewster. There's no widening necessary that there would be with the enhanced striping. And it's really the least disruptive during construction and obviously minimizes construction costs. So the next thing, I'm going to talk quickly on environmental considerations, and I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to get into a little more detail. So just on the survey results, question 1, I think, was the consulting party question that Rebecca's going to talk to. And then questions 2, 3, and 4 were really asking about specific concerns, whether it's natural historical resources, stormwater. And then question 4 was kind of a catch-all, you know, do you have any other concerns? So really what was coming up, you know, from a drainage perspective, stormwater collection, icing, a lot of this has to do with the sidewalks being below the road. So the stormwater flows off the road, flows onto these sidewalks, they ice up, they pond, they puddle, they're getting washed out. There's erosion issues at the outlets of some of these bigger storm drainage systems. And then water quality. So some of that erosion contributes to the water quality along with any number of other factors. Historic, again, the big focus is there's a lot of historic resources out here. We want to minimize and avoid those. And then landscaping, try to maintain the street trees and kind of the rural look of the whole corridor. So those are really what we heard on the environmental side. And I'll let Rebecca talk in more specifics about that.
Thanks, Dave. Let's see if
That should be a little better. Hello, I'm Rebecca Martin. I'm the environmental manager for this project. As part of the National Environmental Policy Act, or what we affectionately call as NEPA, and other state and federal regulations, the DOT needs to consider the potential impacts of all of our projects on the natural, cultural, and socioeconomical resources in the project area. Identifying these resources early on in the project design helps us to identify alternatives that avoid, minimize, and then mitigate for any of those impacts that we might have. For this project in particular, we've had some conversations already about water quality tonight. That's risen to the top as an important factor for the town. This project may require impacts to the wetlands that are along the project corridor and would then require permits from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and also the Army Corps of Engineers. The New Hampshire Natural Heritage Bureau reviewed this project area, and though they had some records in the area, they didn't think any of these alternatives would impact those state-listed species. However, we do expect that this project is in the range of some federally listed species and proposed federally listed species. So as folks have probably heard, the northern long-eared bat has been reclassified as endangered, and that's throughout its range. So that includes New Hampshire, and that's one we do expect to have here. The tricolored bat is currently proposed for listing under the Endangered Species Act. When that final listing happens, which is expected in the fall, it would include the range map for the species, but we expect New Hampshire to be within the range. The monarch butterfly is a candidate species, so it's not proposed for listing yet, but it's on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's work plan, so we think that might be one coming down the road for the project. We would have to do Section 7 consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for whichever alternative is selected for any of these species that are listed at the time of the National Environmental Policy Act review for the project. Through that consultation, it would help us identify conservation measures that the project can take to minimize impact to the species. Another big concern for this project is cultural resources, so we've already heard some conversation and comments about that. Part of our review is about Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. So the department looks through the project area and identifies resources that might be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Historic properties can be any buildings that are 50 years or older and also have been determined to be eligible for the National Register, not that they're listed, but that they are eligible, and also archaeological resources. There are some eligible and listed properties that are already known, and then there are more properties within the project area that are over 50 years old. So if impacts are proposed once we have the community's support around an alternative, we would want to investigate those resources further to see if they would also be eligible or listed. So below ground resources is another part of our review, so that's archaeological resources. There was what we call a phase 1A assessment, so that looks for the archaeological sensitivity of the area, and that's based mostly through a desktop review, but also a walkover and some hand augering. Through that review, there were 22 archaeologically sensitive areas that were identified, as well as 39 historic yard spaces. When we have that preferred, the recommended alternative and some support around it, we'll start looking into a phase 1B archaeological assessment, which is where there are shovel test pits that are dug and more intensive archaeological review for those areas that are identified as archaeologically sensitive through that first phase of the project. For any of those, there are letters that are sent out ahead for any areas where those are needed. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to bring everybody's attention to the opportunity to become a consulting party for this project. So the cultural resources is going to be a really important part of the environmental review, and so folks have the opportunity to be involved in that. We'll have a meeting coming up for this project in October that those consulting parties would be invited to. And if you are interested, appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it more, and also you can contact Federal Highway to be added to the list. And we are fortunate on this project that we do already have some folks identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, so as we start to wrap up and get to comments, just going to summarize really the recommended alternatives. For those of you who looked at it, it's basically the same thing we had laid out over here, and what we've discussed throughout. So starting with the teeing up of Pleasant Valley, the compact roundabout at McManus, the change of the school drive, the BMPs throughout the quarter, the addition of RFBs at the uncontrolled crossings. And again, as we continue through Crescent Lake and the new BMP there, and then the compact roundabout up at Pickering. So as we stated at the beginning, this is our recommendation. This isn't final. We're here to solicit more information. We hope that people fill out the survey. If you know of people who weren't able to make it, let them know where the website is. Pass the information along and encourage them to take the survey. The more information we have, the easier it's going to be to make a decision and keep this project moving forward. As we continue on with multiple alternatives, it's just going to keep dragging the process out. So we're really hoping that we can narrow things down tonight and see that we're getting towards a consensus anyways. So with that, turn it to Jason to talk schedule.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Dave. And again, we're here for you. I just kind of remind everybody where the project came from. So these projects are community driven at first, and they go to the Regional Planning Commission to get voted on as far as the ranking within the Regional Planning Commission. So there's a number of communities. At the time, in 2007, 2008, this project was a significant project for the Lakes Region Planning Commission. So we are here for you. We have about $11 million to put towards the South Main Street project. We'll go through a little bit of that. But again, this is your project, and part of it is to make sure that we understand what the purpose is. So when it originally came forward, it was identified to improve the pavement condition and deal with drainage and water quality. Those were like the two main concerns as we understood what the steering committee put forward. Obviously, we had mobility and safety as key components to that, and that's where the road widening, upgrading the sidewalk facilities because we have some ponding concerns, some traffic congestion. I want to note that none of the alternatives will solve the problems that you may see or experience during those peak summer events. Okay, there is no solution for that. One of the early decisions by the steering committee was no additional lane capacity. So no two-way left turn lanes or no center turn lane, to allow access in and out of drives. That was a decision that the steering committee put forward to the department. So that's why you kind of see one lane in each direction along the corridor. We evaluated the different intersections because, again, the focus coming to the department was, we want you to look at Pickering Corner. So we have a number of solutions. 3 of them didn't really pan out very well from an operations and a safety. So from the department's perspective, obviously, if we put something in, we want to make sure that it's safe for all users. So that's what we have done to date. One of the solutions is always the no build. We can say, no, this is not an acceptable improvement for the town of Wolfeboro, and the department can sort of walk away. But again, we're here for you, and we're looking for. So again, this is a key meeting for us because we really can't do much more without complete resolution. So, sir, like you said, that you didn't necessarily see the survey in February, or some of you didn't get the notice. This is part of our process. We want to be involved with the community in order to get that public feedback. And as Dave said, if you can forward it to your neighbors, you can add it. The survey that we'll show in a second will be up there for the next month. And if we don't feel that we have adequate responses, like we didn't feel like we did last time, we put out the notice to the town to see if they could help us out. We received, I know, additional notifications additional responses after that notification. So if it needs to take more time, then it needs to take more time. So once we have the alternatives decision, we have a project that we can move forward. As Rebecca said, we have a lot of historic resources that we need to do investigation. So that's kind of in the middle here. That process potentially could take 12 months. Now, concurrently, we can kind of refine the design. We can sort of work forward. We can identify the number of properties. There's 122 parcels on this project that could potentially be impacted. So that, between the right-of-way process, the historic coordination, and the remainder of the NEPA coordination, which has to analyze all the impacts, that process could take 12 months. And we kind of, if you can read it, there's some different items in there, and potentially could extend further depending on the coordination that's needed with the consulting parties and State Historic Preservation Officer. So again, once we know we have a least harm alternative, we can proceed with our public hearing process. That's a formal process for the state of New Hampshire that allows us to acquire the rights to parcels. And so that is, again, a very formal public hearing. We won't start that until we understand from the town if we're moving forward with an alternative or not. And then once we have the public hearing, and if there is a finding of necessity, which means the commission weighs in and says that there is a need for the project, then we can move forward with developing right-of-way impact plans and acquiring the rights for construction, for best management practices like the water quality basins that Dave explained. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of work that the department needs to commit to over the next 2 years in order to deliver a project for construction. And then obviously we still have a fair amount of design that needs to go through to prepare contract plans and specifications that our construction bureau would build. So again, that's kind of where we're at today. So we're really looking for your feedback. The 10-year plan originally had about $7 million. We identified this about 2020, I think, during the pandemic, that this was an underfunded project based on the length. And again, originally, when we came forward with the town, we identified that the total length of the original project was in excess of $20 million, and that was before all the escalation over the last 2 years. So we were able to find a little bit more money for the project. It doesn't cover the entire length original, but it does, in what we envision, cover most of this project. So that's kind of, we're about a $3 million shortfall. And again, this is a preliminary estimate at the time. So we look at what we think we need to do for roadway reconstruction, the sidewalks, drainage, the construction of the water quality treatment devices, the additional work that we think that we need on Crescent Lake to be able to convey stormwater to the BMP behind Huggins, and the other amenities that the town would like. So one of the original proposals from the steering committee was enhanced lighting or architectural lighting, and then certainly trying to maintain that village feel for the project. So what we would consider sort of streetscaping and landscaping elements, those are also included in the project cost. So again, we are here for our second public meeting. We're hoping that we'll get a even more robust survey response over the next month, and we certainly can extend that if we need to, but certainly giving everybody a timeline while it's fresh is best for us. I think once we feel comfortable, we're going to initiate all of our cultural resource. As Rebecca said, there is still some field collection that's needed, and that could take some time, and certainly the reporting. And again, we won't do that until we feel that we have a reasonable alternative from the town. And then, so based on today, if we were to receive a decision from the town within the next 1 to 2 months, we feel that we could get to a public hearing. And this process takes about 9 to 12 months, depending on the type of project. So typically, that's a proposal to the governor and council that we're looking for a commission. They will appoint a commission, and then we'll kind of go through that state process. And then finally, once the public hearing is complete, and then we will formalize NEPA, which again is a National Environmental Policy Act, and that will get our final approvals before we can move into final design. So a lot of stuff to go on, but it's really critical that we kind of define that decision making. So we've proposed a recommended alternative based on what we've heard from the steering committee that translated into the project advisory committee, some of the public input that received at the last one, and we're really trying to formalize that now. So the the public survey. So for those of you that are smartphone savvy, you can actually use your camera and use that QR code now. Number of questions in there that kind of point to the different alternatives, what you'd be willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept. We're really looking for, in addition to I don't like it, it would be great to understand why you don't like it, or any other why you might like it. So again, you can use the QR code. The notification should pop up on the camera. You can click that, and then you can sort of work through. If you do have trouble, we have a couple handouts. If you'd like to fill them out, and you can certainly take them home. My business card is there, and you're welcome to mail them in to me, and then we can include it. So lastly, before we open it up for questions, my contact information is here. We do have a new website, so if you had been following, the website changed over because all the state of New Hampshire has upgraded their website. Can't really read my email address, but my business cards are over there. With that, I'd like it to open up to questions. I would appreciate if you could come to the microphone, identify yourself, where you live, and then we will do our best. And again, I really appreciate it. It looks like we did this on time, so I will take that as a win.
Bruce Turkelson, Wolfeboro. I have a question for that gentleman over there. Just quickly. If this roundabout exists, what happens to a tractor trailer comes up here and needs to make a left turn?
He can use that whole circle, so he'll be able to mount that.
There's
Yeah.
not a curb here.
Correct. He can mount it. It'll be a little raised, so cars won't go up.
That's the answer.
So I'll let Dave go because he's the technical expert. He'll just explain what the question is and what our answer was.
Yeah, sure. The question there was just on the larger trucks making the left turns through these smaller roundabouts. And basically the answer is that whole circle internal, kind of the greenish gray that you see there, that is one level. So the larger trucks will be able to go in, take a left, and use that entire circle as they make those turns.
What I'd like to know is, are you going to have to move any buildings or monuments if you make this roundabout you're talking about?
So the monument at Pickering Corner,
Yeah.
that one would be impacted. We have talked to Brewster about it. They were in favor of the alternative and the movement. So we haven't figured out the details, but that would be part of that. No, the widening doesn't. It's just that. Yeah, so that's just for the compact roundabout. At McManus, there would be property impacts, but no building impacts. There wouldn't be any full acquisitions or anything like that. There would be some yard impacts.
So do you have an idea if they took the monument out, where it would go?
That would be determined in conjunction with Rebecca and going through that 106 process, because that would involve the historic groups. So there'd be a lot of people involved in approving that to start with, and in terms of determining where it's going to go.
Well, I just want to say I think it would ruin the looks of Wolfeboro with that monument.
I mean, the intent would be to keep it there, whether it moves back down the road or back towards the lake a little bit, but keep it in that vicinity. It wouldn't be moved cross town or anything.
You'd have to get permission from Brewster.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Norman Inkpen, Lawando Lane. I just had a question about those two charts that you put up with the red, yellow, and green dots. So in both cases, it seemed like the compact roundabout was the preferred, or got the green light at the bottom, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Was that a coordination between both your company, I guess as a consultant, and the Department of Transportation?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's the survey results are included in there. A lot of this discussions happen with the PAC as well. But yeah, a lot of that was kind of engineering judgment, but all of it with the department.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that realistically, and you would be considered the experts on this, traffic flow and impact studies, things like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the traffic flow is based on traffic counts and numbers and data, and I mean, you can see the
Right.
visions of them, and it's
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Bobby Budman, and I'm out Pleasant Valley Road, so this is my main corridor to get to town. My family functions by biking into town in the heavy season. We also raised a child here who biked to town, and most of the children will tend to bike in the area. And I know that you said the shoulder was going to be the bike lane, but we're talking about children pretty much starting at age 9 who use this corridor. This is our main corridor for our schools between Carpenter up to the middle school and up to Crescent Lake back in there. So we're talking pretty much 10-year-olds to, you know, all the way up to 18-year-olds are biking this area for a significant part of the year. And we're talking about a shoulder. We're not talking about a bike lane. A shoulder actually speeds cars up. When we give them a wider road and we give them a lane and they're going to pull into that lane to text or get something. So we're not actually giving people more bike space by putting these shoulders on. So I really just want to consider, and especially with our master plan with town, looking at one of these shoulders, one side at least, and making it a designated bike lane for the children to bike and for our community to have bikes. That's one. Second thing is I do notice there is a retired bus driver in the room. Have you reached out to GWRSD's bus department to ask them for suggestions?
Yep.
Absolutely.
So a couple things.
Perfect.
May I ask
Thank you.
how do you bike today?
So sadly, we have to use the sidewalk, and there's a lot of dirt on the sidewalk. You also, because it's on a hill coming into town, you tend to pick up speed coming down into town, and there's a lot of driveways. It's actually really dangerous by the time you hit Morrissey's. You've picked up so much speed, especially when you're talking about, like when we were biking, you know, with an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old coming into town. It really is not a safe situation currently. And just saying these shoulders are going to be our bike lanes are not really a designated bike lane.
No, that's fantastic. So a couple considerations that we asked Stantec to look into is we do have some existing mature trees within the corridor, and that potentially could be a contributing element for the historic resources. There are some less mature trees as well, especially within Morrissey's and that section of roadway. So we have prescriptive right-of-way. That means we have the right to maintain it, but we don't necessarily have, we don't own the right-of-way in fee. So therefore, we have to be conscientious about how much impact we have outside of what the existing footprint is. So again, we asked Stantec to kind of evaluate that buffer space, the sidewalk, landscaping elements. One of the components that's not included in this, but I think collectively with the town we've worked with is understanding and having an arborist look at the trees and identify which ones are diseased, which ones are leaving. So we've identified the ones that need to be removed anyway, and then the ones that could be saved and have value. So that's one of the elements. So increasing the shoulder width is going to either reduce the buffer space that's provided within it or have potential other impacts, but it's certainly something that we can look into. The 5-foot shoulder is the minimum sidewalk the department would put in. So I think that is of consideration. The other component of this is speed. So currently it's posted as 35 miles an hour. Previously it was 40 miles an hour, you know, south of Pleasant Valley through Kingswood before we'd conducted the speed survey. So, you know, an element of this initially was to evaluate traffic calming and speed reduction. And really the only way to do that is to put vertical elements in the corridor to kind of help that perception to slow traffic down. So some vertical elements are curb, landscaping, trees. So those are some considerations for the sections of roadway between the intersections. And then at the intersections, one of the ideas really early on was trying to create some type of gateway treatment. And that's where the compact roundabout kind of came into place for McManus, was let's create something that is visually appealing, that can slow traffic down, and then really convert that speed zone in front of Kingswood to a 30 miles an hour zone. So, and unless we create some type of restriction, we're not going to be able to slow speed down. As far as speaking to Kingswood and the transportation, Marianne sits on the project advisory committee. I spoke with her today. Part of the improvements for Kingswood and understanding circulation was a direct result of having a meeting with the transportation group. So yes, I think we've kind of tried to consider that. In addition to that, we'd be looking to have additional conversations about the location of the uncontrolled crossing in front of Kingswood and identifying where best to locate that with the improvements. Certainly, if we're going to have an uncontrolled crossing, we want to get away from the intersection area as much as possible. The advantage of a compact roundabout or a roundabout, some type of controlled intersection, is then we can locate the crosswalks within the intersection area and kind of remove that. So I think that all kind of goes into the evaluation that Stantec has done. There's a lot of information. So I'm kind of speaking to your comment about how we came up with that. There is a safety component, there's an operations traffic component, and certainly there is the water quality and the maintenance of this after we're done construction. So I hope that answers your question.
Hi, Brody Deshays again, Elm Street. I had a question, and actually more of a concern about the Pleasant Valley square off. So you square that off there. I'm not sure if that would actually add to safety in that area because of how difficult it might be to see through the tree coverage there. There's a lot of outgrowth that's kind of close to the street there and a very small shoulder. I think it's much easier and much safer for people to be able to merge on. And I also think it's more in the historical characteristics of Wolfeboro, like at Haynes Hill Road or at Elm Street, where people can easily merge onto the main road there at some of those. Even Middleton Road might be somewhat of an example. There's a stop sign there, but it still merges onto the main 28 corridor there. So there's kind of like a historical aspect of this being kind of the normal traffic pattern at multiple points along Route 28 in Wolfeboro to get onto the main road and to see. And plus you have Crossroad, the intersection before, and most people aren't going to use that right lane to get on. They go Crossroad if they're going far down into Pleasant Valley. So I think teeing that off wouldn't really be in the characteristic of the town. I also think teeing it off doesn't really benefit safety or the traffic pattern at all. It just means that these people who typically easily just had to yield and get into traffic are now going to have to stop and really nudge their car out slowly and hope that traffic barreling down or going like 40, 50, because they don't follow the speed limit there. It's downhill and then up the hill. It's going to be difficult to get out. You'll just have traffic start to pile up there, especially during work commute in the morning. So that's just my perspective on that.
Thank you. We can speak to, there isn't a significant amount of crash history, if I understand right, at Pleasant Valley. The angle of the intersection is greater than what is generally recommended, which is why we would prefer to tee that up, especially for drivers that have a difficult time looking over their left shoulder if they're heading northbound. It's obviously a much easier maneuver if you're going right. There is a large amount of pavement area there, so I think I think the biggest advantage for any type of improvement would be to limit the higher speed traffic that is going southbound to make the left onto Pleasant Valley. So that's kind of where we're looking to make safety improvements. But certainly it's a point. As far as the historic character, that is certainly something that we need to look into for from a historic and a cultural resource perspective.
Hi, I have a question on Pickering Corner. If you could change to the roundabout for that one, yes. Has there any consideration on trying to restrict some of the traffic exiting both of the gas stations? Because in the diagram that you have in the back that shows possible ways, for both places, here's the example, you can have traffic with the red arrows crossing across the lane of traffic And there's another diagram for the other gas station, which is basically going to hold up the whole circle. Is there any feasibility of adding a barrier, or maybe it's a policing effort to say you can't turn, cross a lane of traffic to get out of either one of those stations? Because that can, today it causes a lot of problems at that intersection. I think it's going to be worse with the circle because you'll be blocking people going around there if someone's trying to make a left across the lane and stops. Someone can't get out of the circle and someone can't get into the circle. You could basically have a roadblock. So I'm wondering, when you were looking at the designs, was there any consideration to limit the traffic from those stations when you're exiting?
So I'll speak to the access management, and then I'll let Dave speak to the maneuvers through the intersection and operation. So ideally, yes, we would be able to restrict with any improvement egress and access directly from the gas stations into the intersection, because that's a safety issue. And typically, when we make improvements, we'd like to make sure that we have some efficiency within the within the traffic intersection that isn't influenced by driveways. So we, in our driveway manual, if you're going to put a new driveway, we would not have driveways within an intersection area. Any improvements, we'd look to do that. In this case, we can't necessarily restrict the access because there's one, the viability of the business. Two, there's historic. So we can restrict direct access into the intersection, which this may do. Currently, there's limited curbing, so I think vehicles can do that. We also have to consider, and one of the things that I know the gas stations are concerned with is deliveries and access. So something that today probably causes a lot of problems when they do have deliveries. So that is something that we need to consider. This one, this option here, and I'll let Dave sort of speak to the other components of the roundabout, but certainly it pulls the intersection area away from the driveways a little bit more, providing that additional space. And Dave, I'll let you go on. You got anything else?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think Jason spoke to the basics of the, excuse me, of the driveways or the parking lots themselves. Right now, the existing curb's somewhere up in this area. So we have actually kind of closed that off and forced that movement further down Center Street. But in order for them to remain viable and get their delivery trucks and get the customers in and out, we just didn't feel we could completely cut off one of these legs. And in terms of the viability of the roundabout's an improvement on the existing in terms of traffic flow and the ability to handle traffic within that area. So on July 4th, it's going to be backed up. It's going to be backed up today. It's going to be backed up with a signal. It's going to be backed up with any of these alternatives. The one thing with the roundabout, as opposed to some of the stop controls and some of the other alternatives, is the roundabout lets that flow at any time. So you don't have a stop sign, you don't have a stoplight, you never have a red light. So even in the medium and lower flow traffic, the vehicles are going to be able to go, and all you need to do is make rights. So you can make rights out. So you're no longer making lefts against even medium flow type traffic out there, which it's maybe harder in the medium flow traffic to make a left because nobody's going to stop, whereas when it's all jammed up, it's probably easier to weave your way in and out of there. So I think, in terms of the function of the roundabout with this, with these driveways being in place, as Jason said, it'd be good to be able to close them off, but it's just not feasible here.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying this proposal, it would be better than what's today because you're limiting where the exits are. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Today, like if you go to here, this is kind of the end of the curve.
It's closer to the intersection.
So you've got and it's also wider. So you could have two cars come, you could have a car kind of coming southbound and almost cutting across the intersection and sliding in here while somebody else is taking a left in at Center Street at the same time, and then somebody's trying to come out. So because of that expanse of the curb cuts today, there's a lot more confusion and a lot more ability for people to kind of come in and out at various angles.
So you've tried to move it away from
here, we've got more normalized 24 or 30-foot type curb cuts that are standard for like a commercial type business, and we've got two of them on each.
Thank you.
Candy Sharp, and I live down on South Main Street. On this illustration, I don't see people coming out of Center Street being able to go south on South Main Street.
On here?
Yes. Do you?
So Center Street to South Main.
Oh, so Center Street? Oh, I mean, you just come into the roundabout and you keep going
Okay,
around.
because there's no lines that show you can go around.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, you're right. We were trying to show as you get out of the drive.
Okay.
But then once you get into the roundabout, you can circle the roundabout. So you
Okay.
can continue left through the roundabout as you would.
Because one of the previous slides said you were limiting left-hand turns out of Center Street with the.
No,
what
I'm trying to say there is, like this left-hand turn here.
Oh, yeah.
To South Main, you could make a right. If you can't get across that, you could simply make a right and use the roundabout to take the left. Similar here, if you wanted to go here, or if you wanted to go around there.
Yeah, you have to
can
go.
use this drive now and go that way, or circle around there.
Circle around.
So it gives you the ability to avoid any of the left outs by using the roundabout to make that left turn.
I'm Nancy Mayville. I live in Alton, but truth in advertising, I'm a retired civil engineer from New Hampshire DoT. And I was project manager for the roundabouts that you've probably driven through over in Meredith on Route 3 at Parade Road, and going into Plymouth, going into the college on Route 175A. And I would tell you that both of those towns, we offered we went through a similar discussion as we did here. Both of those towns chose the roundabout after much discussion and are very satisfied with it. I sometimes tell the story that when we were out in the public meeting like this in Plymouth, there was an owner of a construction company well known in town who was just sure his trucks were not going to get through that roundabout that we were showing on the plans, and talked, and people listened to him, but the town went ahead and chose the roundabout going in downtown Plymouth. And after that meeting, maybe a year to 2 years later, he came up to me one day and he said, "You were right about that roundabout. It works quite nicely and all my trucks get through it." And I thought to myself, well, that's nice that you told me one-on-one. You didn't tell me in front of 100 people in a big public meeting. But with that said, I also would say that I grew up in Wolfeboro. I've lived my whole life in this area. And I live in Alton, so I'm part of a constituency that comes into the town of Wolfeboro. I'm here several times a week on that corridor, traveling through it, and it's a busy corridor. There's many important town facilities and services along the corridor. And the other constituency I think of, so, I'm an engineer, so when I'm driving through it, I'm looking around thinking about what could happen and what could be done to improve it. The other constituency I think of is the business people who truck through that, especially on that corridor and through the Pickering Corner intersection. They have a really tough time. Anybody who's doing any kind of trucking where time is important to them. Now, what I typically do is come up 28 North and head into downtown. And probably 1 out of every 10 trips or so that I do that, somebody pulls out in front of me who's on 28 trying to turn left and continue south. They've sat on that hill too long. People start doing things that they shouldn't do, and they pull out in front of people. And it's very dangerous there. I believe it's kind of a no man's land for pedestrians and bicyclists out there. There's so much pavement, it's not well defined. So with that said, the other comment I would make is probably, like a lot of you do, I have my little detours around town to avoid this intersection. I go up Union Street, I'll even go Bay Street to Front Street. I mean, there's a lot of us that work around that and kind of grumble as we do it. So, you would not be surprised to hear me say that I'm an advocate for roundabouts. I think they're a well-chosen alternative recommendation for both Pickering Corner and McManus Road. And part of what maybe hasn't been emphasized here is some of the details of a roundabout. They're much smaller than a traffic circle, like the Epsom traffic circle that you might be accustomed to using. But it's much smaller, and there are features built into it to force the driver to drive slower. And in that slowness, there's a number of benefits. One is it's much safer. As one of you just said a moment ago, it's all right turns. So you don't get to have a T-bone accident. You don't get to have a head-on accident. All you ever do is glance off another vehicle if you happen to get there. It reduces the number of accidents significantly. I think the number is around 70%. And it also reduces the severity of the accident significantly. And I think that's an important consideration when you think about the alternatives here. The other thing that I think is kind of hard to get your mind around to do with roundabouts is that because you're driving slower, it's counterintuitive. You're really going to get through it more easily because you're driving slower. It's kind of like a zipper. You know, you just keep putting the teeth together and you're going to get around it and you're going to go. It's not like sitting there the way it is now. So I guess with all that said, you know, I just feel like now's our chance to make a good improvement here on this intersection. We're all grumbling. I think everybody here that drives through that intersection grumbles about it. And, you know, now's our chance to really make a significant improvement. I don't believe we would change the kinds of things that I experience when I go through that intersection if we do some of that enhanced striping and stuff. I don't think it's going to change the basic, you know, things might be more defined, but I don't believe it's going to change the basic functions in the intersection. So with that said, I support the recommended alternative. I think it's very thoughtfully put together. I think it's been developed in a way that is both respectful of the community needs and the local community up and down the corridor, as well as kind of the greater world that is through this corridor. So that would be my comments.
Thank you. Excellent. Are there any other questions, comments? Certainly, we'll entertain it. We can adjourn people. We can have a few more conversations offline. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Dan Ross. I live off of Pleasant Valley Road, so if you could go back to the diagram with the T. My concern about the T formation that you have there and the proposal that you have over here on the left side of the table is coming south from downtown. If you try to make a left turn there, there's no left turn lane. So you get a roundabout that you're proposing. Also, if you are in that left, if you're trying to make the left-hand turn, the traffic's all going to back up into that circle. The way it's set up now, with the wide area of pavement, you can always get over a little bit to let the traffic behind you continue going south if you're trying to make that left and wait for traffic. If you have that road set up like you have in the diagram, you're going to have the traffic back way up behind you trying to make that left, because a lot of times you have to wait for that traffic coming northbound into town before you can get over there to Pleasant Valley.
A couple comments on that as far as certainly reducing the pavement area is going to reduce the amount of potential conflicts, right? So we have a wider pavement area now, we can have bypass. There's a potential conflict with that, especially if we're considering bicyclists. The other opportunity that changing the location, there's two opportunities actually. One is separation of the intersections. Today they're fairly close, so that is more of a likelihood. I believe the operation and the simulations that Stantec put together show pretty good levels of service for this concept. Lastly, I think probably the best opportunity here is any improvement and any teeing up of that provides us an opportunity to do some water quality for the Russ Pond location. So currently there's if we were to stop that and have no improvement, then there's really no water quality improvement for this section of the roadway within the project, because the high point is essentially at Kingswood. So there's some other benefits that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of in addition to traffic operations. Operations is one component of it, but safety is probably from a roadway and a section in this, the speed, but certainly we got to make sure that the water quality component as well as the pavement condition is addressed for the purpose and need.
Thank you. Reeve Curry, I kept forgetting to say that. What about if you, instead of creating a new straight out piece that's quite close to the school, just use Cross Road and close this? Or, and the other question I had was, what if you just did a much better lane defining instead of, if you're going to keep the angle, use a better lane defining so that there is a pass around and it's not so scary getting in and out. I wonder if markings might make it easier for people instead of it being kind of like a parking lot.
Oh, no, great suggestion. So one of the early concepts that we put forward to the project advisory committee was actually dead-ending and cul-de-sacking that location and eliminating that, because that would solve a number of safety, and it wasn't really supported well at the time from the project advisory committee. So it wasn't addressed. We also considered a right-in, right-out, so that you would restrict the lefts. They'd have to go down a crossroad, and that wasn't supported as well. So and then we looked at a roundabout as well, because that was one of the alternatives that was put forward from the steering committee, and that wasn't supported because mostly of cost. If we're going to look at improving South Main Street, let's do it where we have an immediate need between McManus and Pickering, given the fact that we couldn't support the entire section of roadway within the budget. So we did look at a few of those options. They weren't supported by the project advisory committee. This is the one that pretty much rose, and then the other solution is to do nothing. So that's kind of where we're at. We basically some safety improvements with teeing up Pleasant Valley or doing nothing. That was kind of what the direction from the project advisory committee came.
Hello. Hi. Brenda Jarrett, 6 Longstack Lane. On the Pickering Corner roundabout idea, there you go. Where are the pedestrian crosswalks? I know there's one that has the hash right there and right there. I see that as a big problem. Both of those there, it's already a mess when you have pedestrians crossing where you have them now, which is sort of at Center Street, and then that one on the South Main Street, right. So I think that needs to be looked at a little more closely if we move toward the roundabout, because I think there's another crosswalk further on North Main where the blinky light is, right? Yep. So I think it's farther for people to walk, but I think it's safer than having those 3 right there. And earlier, a gentleman mentioned the crosswalks in downtown. That is a hot mess, to say it colloquially. Many people observe them, and many people do not. And in the heart of the summer, it is backed up, and the traffic will back up into whatever it is you do at Center and Main. But that's only for a New York minute in reality, because it's only for a few minutes for a day and that sort of thing. So I think the pedestrian crosswalks have to be managed as well. And overall, as a member of the Conservation Commission, I'm concerned about the water runoff and also the native plants, landscaping, whatever ends up being decided. But I know that's in 2027. and I might not even be here by then. But just putting myself on the record for that.
No, no, that's great. I'll go backwards. We don't have too many wetland impacts within this. There's a couple within between Kingswood Golf Club and Huggins that we'd have to consider, but it's also a location that the water goes there today, and it would be beneficial overall to do something to address the runoff that goes onto the Skelly and the Peterson property. So we are looking at that. That's part of one of the reasons, and certainly a commitment would be to minimize that. And I may have Dave go into a few of the safety benefits. From a pedestrian crossing at Pickering Corner or McManus, there's one thing. This does add an additional crossing. So today we only have 2 crossings, and we know that there are a fair amount of uncontrolled crossings between the Brewster Academy, RFB, and Pickering. So this one would add an additional crossing. This reduces the number of lanes. So one of the challenges today is that we've got to cross 3 lanes depending on the leg, and and it's uncontrolled. Where the roundabout is designed to slow the speeds down. There's some deflection that you have to go in that actually forces people to slow down. There's enhanced striping, and then the pedestrian only has to cross a single lane at a time as opposed to 3 lanes. So the crossing length is actually less in this design than the existing or the minimum build.
I just have this vision of people at the same time, during a busy time, people crossing at all 3 of those, and that's a really tight area.
And during a busy time, everybody is pretty much locked up. And I don't think that we are going to hide from that, because it happens today and it's going to happen tomorrow.
Right. I think the more collaboration you can have with the town, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, et cetera, I think, as well as the business community, I think the more positive impact you'll get, more than 82 survey results. But as you laid out in the timeline, it's going to take a while.
Beginning in 2019, we did establish a project advisor committee, which does have representatives from the select board, business owners, chamber of commerce, school district. It's fairly robust. I would hope that we have tried to make a commitment from the department and certainly with our consultants to be available. We've had 5 meetings to date. Six meetings to date with the project advisory committee, in addition to the public workshop that we had in February. So I feel like we certainly have made an effort to make sure that we hear at least some of the drivers. Certainly the rating criteria came out of the development from the steering committee that utilized the recommendations and provided us that sort of focus on maintaining the village feel, water quality, and certainly safety within that. And again, that's part of the driver for not adding capacity within the corridor.
Thank you.
I'm Rich Lamperti, live on Witten Neck Road. I was under the impression when this project first got proposed that it was going to go from Pickering Corner all the way to the town line on South Main. What happened to the rest of the project?
Great question. Early on, 2019, when the department took that up, our first job is to make sure that the project fits within budget. We did a cost estimate at the time, and it was in excess of $20 million. The project budget at that time only had $7 million. So we came to the town to say, okay, where are we going to focus on first? So we have truncated the project to try to fit within budget. We still didn't have enough within the project budget, and that was okay. Let's design it, let's plan it, let's figure out what we need to do. And if we had the opportunity to get more money, we were able to get a little bit more money, but not enough to do the remainder from the end of Pleasant Valley all the way, heading south to the Alton Town line. So unfortunately, that was a project decision because we didn't have the funding within the 10-year plan for the improvement to fix drainage, roadway, sidewalk widening, water quality, and certainly the right-of-way that we would need to at least provide compensation for, whether it was temporary, permanent, along that stretch.
Is there any plans in the future to try and do that section of it?
From the department's perspective, we're financially constrained by the 10-year plan. Certainly, if the town wants to advocate a project through the Regional Planning Commission, they've been quite successful over the last 20 years at getting projects into the 10-year plan, and I would suggest to advocate through the community leadership and push projects forward to the Regional Planning Commission. But that's kind of outside of the department's purview. That's a pretty unique process of the state of New Hampshire, working through the town to the Regional Planning Commission to propose projects.
Thank you.
All right, 8:10. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so let's go to the. Oh, I got one more. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Bobby Vedman. Again, Pleasant Valley. I'm sorry, Brody. I have to totally disagree with you. Please protect Russ Pond. By having the water retention basin at Pleasant Valley Road, I can say as a citizen, in 16 years, probably 5 people have taken a left onto Main Street off of Pleasant Valley Road. Most of the traffic does go to the right there, but that Y coming up, our community we have a median age over 58.8 years, and that look over your left shoulder is a very difficult turn there. You had 2 drawings, one with a turn lane, one without. If you do the plan, could you please add that extra turn lane to allow traffic to go around the people taking a left down Pleasant Valley Road? Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly consider it.
Sorry, one last question. You can't do anything about the apathy. If you have this survey all around and people aren't filling it out, I don't know how you're going to handle that, but it is not your fault if your survey is made available to everybody, and I ignored it before tonight. So
thank
talk
you.
to your neighbors if you want more people to be answering the survey.
Yeah, so I'll have Dave flip to that. If you are...
I live here in Wolfeboro. You know what? Not everybody has a computer. So if you send surveys or you expect us to go online, it isn't going to happen.
Thank you for that. I was just about to say that we do have paper copies of the survey that you can take with you for those that don't have a computer or would just like to bring it home and read it, and then you can take my business card and you can mail it in. So we do have those available. There's about 50 copies. Probably not going to take the entire room, so hopefully, but if you want to take it home, feel free. So apologize, we were almost about to get to that. Let's flip to the survey one more time. Again, this is available in paper copy as well as electronic. Obviously, we'd love you to use the electronic version, but on your way out, if you could pick up the paper copy, that would be fantastic. So sorry if we didn't make that clear earlier. All right. Well, thank you very much. This was great. Really appreciate the turnout.